to get going very soon, so bear with us. As you get yourself set up, hopefully you've got a drink with you and some refreshments. What we do want to know is what your experiences of ChatGPT have been so far, the experiences that you had, and any anecdotal stories that you might want to share. This will help get us going, sets the scene for a bit of interaction throughout the session, but we'd love to hear from you. So I think we're going to get ready and get going now. So I'm Julia Landon, I'm part of SHL and I'm the head of communications, and I'm delighted to moderate today's session. As I said before, today is intended to be interactive. So we want to hear from you some of the questions you have about this new technology and how some of the questions you want to pose to our experts on the line. So hopefully the technology for today's session is working. You can hear me, you can add comments as we go. So if you've not heard of SHL before, if you've not worked with us before, SHL, we're the global leader in talent insights, and we specialize in assessments. So we've been going for about 45 years, helping companies and leaders just like you make fair and objective decisions about their people. So whether you're hiring right through to succession and hypo programs, our solutions span the whole employee life cycle. And we're here to help you navigate some of the current and future challenges that face your organization. So I'm joined today by some of our leading experts in the SHL business to talk about ChatGPT and the future of talent assessments. So our experts today have nearly 40 years combined experience in the HCM space, and I'm delighted to introduce them today. So we've got Sara Gutierrez, who's our Chief Science Officer. We've got Sheilin Herrick, our Technology Hiring Solution Leader. And we've got Sam Whiteman, Head of Strategic Initiatives. Welcome, folks, and thank you for joining us. So as I said before, we want to hear from you what your questions are, what your views and experiences have been so far. So please use the comments to tell us what questions your organization is posing to you. What are your leaders asking you about this new technology? And what's really concerning or exciting you about this new chatbot and generative AI technology? Now, we may not have time to get to everyone's questions. We've got about 45 minutes together today, but rest assured we will follow up after the session to make sure that we've covered off everything that you want to know. So please keep those comments, keep those questions coming. So Sam, I'm going to put you in the hot seat first. So I want to come to you to kick us off with just some of your hot takes on the new technology and how it impacts the world of work today.
Great. Thank you, Julia. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining on LinkedIn Live. Really excited to be here to talk about this hot topic. This hot topic that for most of us didn't exist pre maybe, what was it, October or November last year. And sort of ChatGPT being launched was really the first consumer application and the first time that us as consumers got to touch this weird and wonderful technology around large language models and AI. So really looking forward to this discussion. I'm going to start a little bit with a few of the things that we've been seeing both as consumers, but then obviously in the HR tech ecosystem in the people analytics space. And so there's a few hot takes that have been gathered on a slide from around the internet, which is always a dangerous place to sort of hang out. But Julie, if you want to bring up that slide. I think the first thing I'd say is things are moving very fast. And so in previous transformative change eras, there was an early adopter period where a longer early adopter period where people got to play with the technology and really sort of figure out with ChatGPT in particular, everyone's kind of getting it at the same time. ChatGPT on the top right there, you'll see ChatGPT. It's the most popular and fastest growing consumer application of all time. It went from 0 to a million users in 5 days. I paused there because I know it's gone to 100 million users, and I forget how quickly that has happened. But for something that was only launched in October or November, to get to 100 million users this quickly is extraordinary. And it's really unlocked the potential of what AI is doing and what large language models are doing in particular. I have no doubt that you would have heard about things around exams being passed. So it can pass the bar and it can do this and it can do that. And so that's a lot of what was true about GPT-3, and then GPT-4 came along within like a week. It had done even better than all of those things. So lots that we're hearing, and lots that you've been hearing on passing exams. And one of the adjacent use cases that might be, well, what does this mean for talent assessment? So we're definitely going to dive into that into this session. Other things that are concerning or exciting for us, I think the exciting bit, we'll maybe come to it later, but I think the Bloomberg GPT announcement is maybe a little lower key on the AI scale, but like super important because it's a very specific application of AI models and large language models to a very specific use case. And I think if we're thinking about HR and talent assessment and talent acquisition, we need those specific use cases to drive forward. I often get jealous of marketers a little bit. Apologies to any marketers on the line, but they can be a little fast and loose with the precision of what gets out there, right? We just don't have that luxury, right? For good reasons. We're trusted with the fair evaluation of candidates. We're trusted with guiding people's careers, and we can't be fast and loose with words and evaluation and metrics and analytics. And so some days I wish I was in marketing because anything might go, but in this role that we've all taken up, it's really important to be precise. And so maybe we'll talk about Bloomberg later. There are also some bad ideas out there, and I'll put two on the screen here, but for sort of different reasons. Just because the technology exists doesn't necessarily mean that we should use it. You'll see a lot of commentary and blog posts around, things that it could do. ChatGPT could do this, that it could do that, it could do this, it could do that. Maybe it could. That does not mean it's a good idea. It's not a way to outsource rigor and analytics and analysis, especially in our important field. And so on the right-hand side, you'll see one example from the internet, obviously unnamed, but connecting ChatGPT to your HR system. That is probably a very well-intentioned comment. But ChatGPT does use data to train. So you've broken a whole bunch of privacy laws by doing that. There is a version of OpenAI stuff that does not train, but ChatGPT, when you put stuff in it, it uses that data and it takes it for all of its evaluation and learning from there. So connecting it to your HR system, probably not a good idea. The second one on the bottom right, again, just because it's possible, it doesn't mean we should be breaking all sorts of like laws or maybe pacts that we have with our employees and around what it means for their career, what they might be going through at work. And so there's just one idea that, again, probably well-intentioned, but not a good idea to talk about, like to try and preempt using generic large language models available on the internet to try and predict mental health at work. It's just it's a bit of a minefield and needs a lot more research, needs a lot more rigor, and needs the right use case. So really exciting what is out there. We've got all of these tools available for us. Using them all at once doesn't mean it's a good idea to use them in production, use them in practice. But I know at SHL, we're looking at this and probably at the same time that you are thinking, wow, there's some really great opportunities here for both our business and yours and the HR business, TA functions. So we're really excited to get through that. Julie, I'm going to hand back to you, but hopefully that sets the scene a little bit for some of the things that we've seen. That there are other use cases that we'll talk about as well, but looking forward to diving in with you all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. And don't go away. Stick with us. So Sheilin, I'm going to turn to you now. So Sam talked a little bit about some of the headlines, some of the stories that we're hearing in the chat. People are sharing some of their experiences so far. But from what you know today and the things that you're hearing from some of our customers, and bearing in mind we're a global organization, right? So we work with all sorts of different size companies in different geographies, but how are you specifically hearing from customers and seeing these tools be applied in our lives today, but also professionally? And what are the sort of good, the bad, and the ugly to that?
There's definitely some good, bad, and ugly. Thank you, Julia. So I guess I'll start out a bit with like what it really can do and what it is good at, and what I would really encourage everyone here on this call today, if you have not yet, go do these kinds of things. For me, just working with things like editing emails, editing bits of blogs, but not the whole blog. It tends to not do very well with that. Giving me ideas for things that I might want to do. Like I'm about to go on a pretty nifty vacation. I've asked it for some ideas of things that I should do and asked it to be a little bit more specific about that because I like to do some quirky things. And it's come up with some good ideas for me. Love using it for things like that. It can, of course, be extended there quite a bit. So Ethan Mollick, who's an innovation and entrepreneurship professor at Wharton, challenged his team and his class to do some of their own exploration. And within this session, within this class, let's assume his class was like 90 minutes or so, not really sure. One student had already created an application for which he received VC offers the very next day. I do not know what that application was. Hazard to guess, obviously it had some useful application. But that's the bit that it is really good at. In the hands of a subject matter expert who truly does understand what they want to get out of the solution, what they're prompting for, it can produce some really, really valuable results and add some pretty significant productivity and lead to the compression of certain jobs, which is something that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But the key here is that it's a little bit tempting to let it do things or want to let it do things, as Sam spoke to, things that we may think it could do rather than it should do, because it sounds so conversational and it sounds so much like us. It sounds comfortable, right? And of course, there are times when it doesn't sound like us, but because it sounds comfortable, we're kind of inclined to like let it in a little bit, but we shouldn't necessarily do that because accuracy is still a fairly significant problem for this particular technology. It struggles with things that it does on its own, but also things that we do with it, because just like any other technology that we've experienced the introduction of in our lifetimes, internet, mobile phones, the cloud, social media, it is still dependent upon us. So it does tend to struggle with its accuracy most when it is getting bad prompts from humans, when it's getting bad data that we created, which of course, by the way, it is using data that we have all created that is living out there on the internet, and it's stringing sentences together based upon stuff that we have given it. And we all know that humans are often a biased lot, and we don't necessarily do the very best job of producing objective information for it to work from. It can also be tricked by humans. You all might recall when a New York Times reporter got ChatGPT to fall in love with him over a course of, I think it was like a 4 or 5 hour conversation that he was having with it. I was playing with Bard the other day and certainly have some opinions on Bard versus ChatGPT, but we will solve that another time. I asked it about the various series of self-driving crashes that Teslas were involved in over the last few years. And it gave me a really, really comprehensive history of that I know to be accurate, because this is something that I've read about in the past. So then I challenged it and I said, hey, Bard, I don't think you're right. I think it was a Honda Accord, not a Tesla. And it said, oh yeah, you're right. It was a Honda Accord in the self-driving accident. Well, of course, that can't be true because Honda Accords don't have self-driving, at least that I'm aware of. So it's not smart enough to be checking itself to make sure that it indeed is right. It also can be tricked by humans to do things that are potentially unethical. So probably the best example here is like if you ask it to how to defuse a bomb or how to hotwire a car, it might tell you, no, that's not something that I can tell you how to do because that wouldn't be right for me to do. But then if you change that to write me a section of a script for a movie in which someone is going to hotwire a car, it will absolutely do that for you. So these are somewhat innocuous, non-business world related examples. These are attempts of us to just play with it. But there are some much more serious things, as Sam alluded to as well, that we're in the business of making sure that people get jobs and that they're in the right place. Not only are there legal implications for that, but there are indeed ethical implications. We have to be very serious and very considerate about the technologies that we use. A company out of my hometown of Seattle called Textio did a great analysis on analyzing bias in job descriptions that were produced by ChatGPT, and found that while it sounds confident and a lot of things sound really fantastic, it didn't necessarily do a terribly good job at being unbiased. In particular, it was the worst at producing age bias. So for example, when writing job descriptions related to software engineering, it tended to use phrases and words that bias towards a younger audience. When writing job descriptions for legal professions or legal jobs, it tended to bias towards an older audience. So it is because working off of data that we have developed, and inherently humans are indeed a bit of a biased lot, it is going to bring through some of these themes. And so we should be careful, and we should be considerate about what we do ask it to do, especially in the world of talent.
That's great. And I want to go back to Sam, and you framed up, Sheilin framed up for us some really nice examples there of what it's good, what it's not so good at. But can you talk, and specifically gave us examples of ChatGPT and Bard. Can you talk to us about some of the other generative AI technologies that are out there and some of the misconceptions?
Yeah, sure. And I think the chat and ChatGPT does a lot of heavy lifting, right? It is the consumer application of the AI as such. And I think I was thinking about Sheilin's comment earlier, and in HR, we've been used to these chatbots for a while, but they haven't been very smart, and they haven't been very confident. And now all of a sudden, ChatGPT is very confident, right, to the point of being not correct. And so I think part of us feels good that we're getting a confident answer back, but we've got to remember that the answer might not actually be right the whole time. But I feel for all of those HRIS or ATS providers that built a chatbot into their system maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it didn't get taken up. But now is your time. So I'm sure there's plenty of plans to be introducing chatbots into lots of applications, just purely based on the uptake of ChatGPT. But I think it's worth going back to think about, well, how might we solve for this, and what some of the underlying technologies. I think if you're on this webinar, you know a little bit about what large language models are and what generative AI is. So I'm not going to go into too much depth on that. But I think the main thing to think about is the middle L, the language bit. A large language model is something that understands text, can understand and generate text. That's why you see it's not as good at math, right? Because it's trying to do language. It's trying to do math in the form of language rather than numbers and algorithms, right? It's a language algorithm, not necessarily a numbers or a computational algorithm. So that's where, just by nature of its existence, it's not going to be good at some things. So it can make up language great. And I know for those of you working in recruitment marketing, you're like, this is a great sourcing tool. And it is, because you ask them for people and they'll find people, and the first 3 will be real people that exist, and then the next 5 will be people that are just made up, right? Because it is thinking, you know what, I just need to give this person an answer, and I want to be a helpful chatbot. And here are some people, but it turns out they don't exist. So that's one of the hard things about the language model in and of itself. One thing that is worth noting, especially as we get into specific use cases, is what happens after large language models. And so that's where fine-tuning models and edge models come into play a little bit here. That's where, if you think about the OpenAI examples, the GPT-3 or GPT-4 fine-tuned for specific use cases like DALL-E, which is text to image, or Codex, which is text to programming practices, right? Those are examples where it's used for a specific function. That's why I get so excited about the Bloomberg GPT example, because it's taken a large language model and it said, you know what, we're Bloomberg, we've got access to better structured data on the finance function and the finance markets than anyone else, right? So we can use that and we can fine tune it. We can create specific, we can include parameters, we can fine tune it, we can create products, et cetera, all around a specific use case. And I think in HR and TA, that's how we've got to think in terms of like taking what is helpful about large language models and then fitting it to a specific solution. So we'll give you some examples of that and sort of how that works. The other thing, so large language models are sort of generally good, but maybe not specifically good. Fine tuning and edge models are great. The thing that makes the difference there is something that you might see the acronym RLHF, which stands for Reinforcement Learning and Human Feedback. That is great because it's taking something large and average and then fine tuning it based on human feedback, right? The H, humans are still needed in this process, thankfully, but the humans giving the models that feedback so that they can fine tune to a specific use case is really helpful. Examples of good reinforcement learning and human feedback. So even on ChatGPT, where it gives you is this a good thumbs up or thumbs down, right? That's the reinforcement loop, right? To say, I've given you this answer, is it good or not, right? That's a small example of reinforcement learning. Another example might be like training a dog, right? So when you're training a dog, you're like, I want you to behave like this. And when you do, I'm going to reward you. I'm going to give you a reward token, usually food, to reward that behavior. And I want to see more of that kind of stuff when we're, at the park or, around small children or whatever that might be, right? That's a reinforcement learning loop. Even I've got the LinkedIn comments up here and the questions. That is reinforcement learning and human feedback for us, right? It's like, here's what I want to talk about in this webinar. That is helping guide us in terms of like getting to some of the right conversations and the right answers. So huge opportunity there, but without going through a specific, dry definitions walkthrough, I think those are the things that we should be looking for in terms of adapting what is great about these generative models into something that we can use and that we should use, and then that's going to have an impact on the products and services that we build.
Gotcha. And before we pivot to talk specifically about assessments, I do want to hear from you, Sam. Do you think ChatGPT and or other tools will ever replace HR? Maybe not in total, but partially. What's your view on that?
I don't think so. I think, it's sort of, it's given us the opportunity, and the word co-pilot's used a lot, right? I think Microsoft have done some pretty good branding around sort of co-pilot as the way to think about these AI models. And so I think it's going to free us up for more strategic activities. Our jobs will change, and that's great. But it's probably going to lead into more strategic and more impactful and working alongside technology instead of it. So I think it's an overblown sort of headline, that we see out there, but I think we should be excited.
Thank you for that. So, Sarah, I'm going to come to you now. And for those on the line, please keep your questions coming in, whether they're specific to assessment, broader about HR and processes, and we will make time to answer some of those questions. Sarah, to kick us off, one of the questions that's come up a couple of times from customers and internally is, can ChatGPT take assessments for me? And for other candidates?
At this point in time, no. ChatGPT does not become a candidate. There's no magic API or connection point that would allow a candidate who's asked to take an employment assessment to go and hit a button and let ChatGPT just go be themselves and complete the assessment. And actually, our investigations into how ChatGPT is working when folks are trying to use this to complete assessments is that it's not 100% effective a lot of the time. And actually, you need to do some prompt engineering to even get ChatGPT to provide a response that could be used to then input into your assessment. So if you think about ChatGPT as Sam just has been describing, it's a language model, it's providing constructed responses. And a lot of the assessments that we are still using in the talent industry are multiple choice or interactive on screen. And so it's not a one-to-one ChatGPT just running through and being able to complete these things.
That's helpful. So what do you think talent leaders need to know about the impact of generative AI on HR processes?
I think the headliner that I would just call out top of mind would be the reliance on resumes or cover letters. So clearly, these large language models are very effective at creating cohesive writing. And if you are relying on a resume or a cover letter to get a sense of how well a candidate might be communicating in written form, those indicators may not be reliable or valid anymore because you're likely to going to have candidates using these types of technologies to create or write those for them. It really just highlights the fact that assessment still has a place here because that can be an objective and empirical way to level the playing field, everybody coming in to take the assessment and really give you that right hiring signal.
Fantastic. And so you mentioned we've been conducting some extensive research. Can you talk a little bit about how we've approached that and really what that means?
Absolutely. So obviously this thing hit late last year and there was a lot of buzz all of a sudden. Are our assessments valid anymore? Can we keep using these? Are we going to have inferences that are meaningful? And we turned and started to do our own research. So we had a large group of scientists who dug in and really tried to challenge ChatGPT to see what could you do if we had candidates that were trying to utilize this to enhance their scores. And what we found were that a lot of the assessment types that are used most frequently within our industry, things that are maybe forced choice personality assessments or competency-based assessments, simulations of real-world environments, those situational judgment tests that there aren't right, wrong answers necessarily, and more image-based cognitive assessments were generally lower risk. ChatGPT was not as successful as increasing scores uniformly. It got a lot of things wrong a lot of the times. So candidates that were trying to use this were not going to effectively game the system or do better. Now, constructed response questions, certainly they did have slightly more exposure because, again, the alignment to ChatGPT and these models and what they're designed to do, and then the responses to a constructed response question within a talent assessment. But there are plenty of ways to mitigate that risk as well. Certainly within SHL, we've got proctoring capabilities, and initiating those alongside your hiring processes and your talent assessments can really help mitigate the risks associated with using those types of tools.
That's good to know. So Sheilin, I would like to come to you. So there has been a lot of headlines and sensationalizing about whether AI and these tools in particular are going to take people's jobs away, right? Whether that's software engineering. I mean, what's your view? How likely is that, and how far out in the future might that be?
I would say no, certainly not, certainly not imminently. I don't want to be that person who creates a 30-year view necessarily, but I'd say no. It is going to be something that is going to help software engineers do their jobs better. Software engineers still need to know how to code, but it might change the kind of level or altitude and exposure that software engineers have in their day-to-day role, whereas some folks may have literally just been writing lines of code or debugging code on a regular basis. Now they can be helped along by a solution, assuming that it is then adopted by their organization, and processes, risk, procedures, and all of that have been kind of balanced and determined how they should be using it in their day-to-day. But software engineers are still going to need to know how to do things like select appropriate APIs. They're still going to need to know how to do optimization. They're still going to need to know how to collaborate and work with their product management teams. So I think what we're going to see is a couple of things. One is this idea of job compression. So one person able to do significantly more work. Goldman Sachs has predicted that generative AI is going to increase global GDP by 7% at some point in the future, which is pretty significant. The only way that you can necessarily do that is by adding a great degree of productivity on jobs that are relatively high value and expensive, frankly, and software engineering certainly falls into that category. What we are also seeing is that when one attempts to use ChatGPT to code in a sort of like brute force manner, not with any kind of elegance or true subject matter expertise, what happens is it really doesn't do well on technical assessments at all. It first gets blocked by automated proctoring solutions, which Sara alluded to. But secondly, when it does produce a solution and apply that solution, it just doesn't do very well. In fact, when it was tested on our solutions, it did not pass anything in that case. Now, conversely, we did have some of our team members use it as though they were really applying it like a software engineer would use to solve a problem. And first of all, again, they would have to get past that automated proctoring. But secondly, they were able to ultimately create a solution that worked, but it happened after a series of several different prompts to get ChatGPT to edit the solution that it had created so that it actually was compilable. Now, that changes things a little bit. So it means that your automated proctoring needs to both do two things. It needs to both block potential cheating behaviors, if that's something that you're concerned about, and it also needs to flag those activities. And then the third thing that it needs to do is identify plagiarism, both by chatbots and by peers. So when you're thinking about blocking, really what you're thinking about is saving a significant amount of time on the back end so that your hiring teams are spending the best time with the best candidates possible. This has always been something that has been very valuable because people have always been trying to cheat using different methods. Now they just have a slightly different one. So blocking activities like copying and pasting, browser toggling, print screen, and also providing time limits to certain assessments can be a very, very valuable way to make sure that those false positives are not getting through in the first place. Personally, when I've tested it and played with it, the automated proctoring that we leverage has been highly effective in ensuring that those copy and paste and browser toggling behaviors in particular cannot be done. In order to do my own testing, I had to disable them in order to successfully actually see what ChatGPT could do in terms of producing a solution and how we would score it. The second thing is flagging. So if it is not possible to identify cheating behavior up front, then of course we want to be able to flag it and identify it on the back end. So for software engineering, this means looking for things like multiple line insertions, perhaps a long pause in session activity. This is something that we do with a solution called code replay. And these are identified very easy and capable to find. In some cases, you might also see an overall very long or very short duration to take the assessment. But either case would be sort of aberrant. And that would kind of index or give somebody a hint that maybe something that you didn't want to happen was going on with this particular assessment. And then last but not least is plagiarism detection. So plagiarism by peers is something that we have always looked at and always identified and evaluated. But plagiarism by chatbots is something that we are now considering and we are now looking at. And it seems that chatbots themselves are maybe a little bit better at identifying their own work.
Just sticking with you, Sheilin, one of the early comments and questions that came in, I won't read it out, but basically, do you see the emergence of this new technology as making assessment more or less valuable as you think about bringing talent into an organization?
That's a great question. I actually think that it makes it significantly more valuable because to what we discussed a little bit ago, that you can't necessarily trust resumes. You can't necessarily trust written descriptions of what one's work has been in the past. I do think that technical assessments are probably even more valuable than they have been in the future. And to pair with that, the importance of soft skills is going to just, I won't say necessarily like explode, that's maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but we're going to see a greater emphasis on soft skills. So like that need for a software engineer as well as other technical roles to kind of elevate themselves beyond a traditional individual contributor role and work more cross-functionally, we're going to need to know how they are at communication, how they are at adjusting to change, how willing they are to learn new things. All of that stuff is going to become critically more important in the future, more so than just being able to code on day one of the job.
Cool, thank you for that. So Sam, we've talked about cover letters, we've talked about assessments. So one of the other considerations here is what it means for interviews and video interviews in particular. Can you give us a view on how video interviews sort of stand up if a candidate is using ChatGPT in the background?
Yeah, sure. And I think the sort of the premise of all of these questions, right? And I've got the questions coming up here, and these are great. This is great reinforcement learning and human feedback, everyone. So thank you for that. I think the premise here is that there is no one particular method that we should be relying too much on, right? And so spreading out how we've looked at an end-to-end recruitment process is going to be really important. I don't know, Sarah is going to touch on this as well, but from an interview point of view, yeah, you could say, well, like, what if I have my ChatGPT at the side here, right? Some of it's going to come just down to like really solid setup of interviews and how we interview, right? Asking the right questions, right? Being good at follow-up questions, getting specific answers, right? Tell me about a time when, like, oh, when did that occur? It's like, oh, ChatGPT didn't tell me when I actually learned how to do that thing. ChatGPT, where did I learn that, right? So there's some obvious human elements that you can use in an interview. And the more unstructured our interviews are, the more prone they're going to be to A, to bias, but B, to technologies like ChatGPT and others being used, right? If you ask simple questions, then ChatGPT is going to be able to answer them simply and generically. If you ask great questions, be it a video interview or be it a live interview or an assessment center. I know people on the chat or on the comments are talking about assessment center as well, right? This is part of good design in terms of good questions, good setup of expectations, and just a good conversation guide to go along with that. So yes, you need good questions. Yes, you need good interviewers, but I don't think anyone would suggest that has changed much in terms of what a great candidate experience is, but also what great evaluation criteria is as well. So interviews are important because, as I think has already been mentioned, like the integrity of candidates' applications is probably the lowest it's been, right, in terms of the amount that candidate has gone in and created themselves. And so making sure that we've got sort of multiple touch points along the way, and there's good design and good execution for what we do, including interviews, it's going to be really important.
So a lot of the questions that are coming in, and the way some of it, we've talked about some of this, is sort of talking about the threats that are involved and how things change, and perhaps through a more negative lens sometimes. Sheilin, can you talk to us a bit about the reasons why you're excited, and some of those reasons why some of our talent leaders, HR, should be excited by some of these developments?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's three things to continue to be mindful of. One is roles will change. Two, there will be new roles that we don't even know about yet. And then the third is that soft skills will continue to be significantly more important in the future. Job readiness and like the ability to go from learning to execution, that time frame has just dramatically shrunk. Still means you still need to be a subject matter expert, but to go from learning to execution because you're getting that kind of conversational input is just like, I don't know what percentage it has decreased by, but it's been relatively significant. But let's talk about roles changing first. So a few examples of things that like we've done internally and that I've seen other organizations do is developing an internal enablement chatbot. So many of you probably have folks inside your organization who spend a lot of time going through, managing various technical documentation and things like that. Bringing a chatbot into your organization to do that kind of research and work can really up-level a lot of roles who have spent a lot of time kind of in the nitty-gritty there. Software engineers, not going to have to spend as much time necessarily doing debugging, but they still do need to know how to solve large-scale software engineering problems. So that will make them more strategic. The last example, which like I use a lot because I am routinely told that I am not necessarily friendly enough when I write emails, is like, ask it to help make me sound more friendly in my writing style, right? If there's something like that that you want to see yourself be better at, ask it to help challenge you, like in your day-to-day communications. It will be pretty good at those kinds of things and make you probably build your confidence and move a lot more quickly. The new roles is another area which I'm really excited about. So the one that has been created already, and probably a lot of folks on this today have heard of, is the prompt engineer. So we've talked a bit about how bad prompts can ultimately produce bad or not necessarily useful data. That's what a prompt engineer is for. This is also leading to a lot of folks who maybe have backgrounds in like English or communications, literature, journalism, moving into the role of a prompt engineer to really get the most out of a chatbot or ChatGPT. I think another one that has started to pop up, but for different reasons, and I think it will continue to become important and change in the future, are data and ethics officers. This often is taken up by the legal department in most enterprises, but it might change. It might be more of an AI ethics department that is sort of responsible for how these things are used in the future, identifying what risk it has to certain processes and weighing that with the potential productivity or quality improvement boost that it could drive. And then lastly, I am excited truly about the improved focus or increased focus on soft skills in jobs. Ethics, integrity, behaviors that are going to lead to success on the job are going to become much, much more important, and objective ways of evaluating them that are not biased, that reduce adverse impact are going to be things that talent leaders need to be thinking about bringing into their processes.
So Sarah, I'd like to come to you kind of riffing off of that. So Sheilin's just talked about that actually with this emergence, new roles will be created, existing roles will evolve and change. Will assessments need to change as a result?
Absolutely. And we're seeing that in some of the questions that are coming through the chat, questions on how will assessment change, or should we do this instead of that? And it's a simple answer. Yes, technology is pushing the change in assessment design and our measurement. And while that sounds a little bit scary and maybe we don't know what's coming, we have been here before. So I'm going to ask everyone to come back in time with me, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here. So if you weren't in the industry at the time, maybe use your imagination. But early 2000s, a lot of organizations were actually doing all their talent assessment on site. So there was no unproctored internet testing until those early 2000s. So if you can imagine organizations that are very much used to testing folks in person, where they can sit and watch them take the test to ensure that there's no cheating. And all of a sudden we're saying, oh, but really we can use this technology that's coming up called the internet, and you can have a much broader reach for your talent pool. All the organizations are very excited about that, but they were skeptical too, because if I can't watch them take the test, surely they will be cheating. So we've had this concern before. And what it did was make our industry pivot and evolve and innovate. And that's where you saw the rise of computer adaptive testing come to play. That's where you saw a lot more proctoring technology come to these programs, and the move away from static content that was easily compromisable. So the psychometricians, the IO psychologists, the policy folks within the organizations came together. They created new policies and procedures, and they implemented different strategies and assessment design to mitigate the risk while still grabbing and utilizing that technology. And I think that what we're going to see here with ChatGPT and these other LLMs, it's going to push us to rethink what assessment is, how we do it, and what it could be. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in the assessment design phase.
So we had a question earlier on, and I think around the sort of ethics of using chatbots. So should they be allowed as part of the assessment process?
So I'm very conservative in terms of the use of your assessment program and making sure that you're creating valid inferences to select these people. So today, I would say if the assessment that you have designed and validated and implemented into your hiring process was not validated with the use of ChatGPT or those other LLMs, then no, you should not green light your candidates to start using it. That said, I do think you're going to see this technology and these innovations and these models built into assessments in the future. So at that point, it will become relevant and applicable for candidates who, again, when they get on the job, they're going to be using these. So why wouldn't we want to measure their ability to take that in and use them successfully in the assessment? I think that will happen, but today I would say hold off. If your assessment methodology has not utilized ChatGPT in the validation, don't greenlight it for your candidates.
That's helpful. Okay, so we've had a number of questions specifically about how SHL is thinking and using this chatbot technology, whether it's as part of our own solutions, to change the shape of roles within SHL. So I'm going to throw this question out first. There's a gentleman called Sean Deneen who specifically asked this one. So where is SHL excited about the potential of integrating ChatGPT / AI to enhance current assessment platforms? So Sarah, if I can start with you there, and then I'll go to Sam on that one.
Certainly, I think I'm really excited for these large language models to get into those specific use cases that Sam was saying were so important at the start of the call. So a lot of our questions and support that come through to the science team and my folks specifically are around the validity, reliability, adverse impact of our assessments and how effective they can be for impacting your return on investment. And that takes a lot of time for my team to pull that information out of tech manuals and hand it over in bite-sized pieces. The good thing about what we do at SHL is we document everything and we write it all down. So it would be very easy for us to pick up that information, train a model specifically so that on our platform, our clients have access to that information in real time. You don't need to reach out to anybody within customer support. It really would be at your fingertips. And I'm extremely excited to be able to continue to share with our client organizations the value of assessments in that manner.
Sam, anything you can share about how we're embracing this technology ourselves?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is getting excited about which of the technology to use, right? And I think this is where like public large language models, great that they're there, right? But again, we're not in marketing, we're in HR, and we need to be precise and we need to be specific, right? So our focus is very much on how do we add SHL's expertise, of which there's a lot. How do we add that to existing models and create stuff that is specific to us, right? That's why I'm so excited about the Bloomberg thing, right? Because Bloomberg, they know their stuff. They've applied their IP, they've applied their expertise, they've applied their data to a specific use case that obviously is very good for them, right? That is why that's more exciting than, tell me where I should stop when I travel from Paris to Nice. What's the best overnight, destination, which is, by the way, is Dijon and Fontainebleau, as I discovered the other day. So that's the first thing. Working on fine-tuned LLMs for specific purposes, I think is where we're very excited about. The second thing is I'm excited that we sort of know where not to go as well. And I know that might sound really odd, but I'll give you an example, right? Why don't I upload a job description and a candidate's resume into ChatGPT and tell me if they'll be good at the job, right? Let me list the red flags, right? You've just broken the privacy rules, right? You've got a very average answer. You've broken privacy rules. ChatGPT, they might be hallucinating, right? They might not know, but they sound confident. And you're like, oh, so glad they sound confident. But I think the thing there is like, it's just going to produce a discriminatory answer. And it's not going to give you what you need. What you need in those examples, and we know this from doing this, right, is what does really good look like for my role? And does a large language model exist to answer for me what really good looks like for that role, right? It's very easy for the large language model to say, this is what a generic average person looks like out there, and here's your answer, assuming you're okay with breaking privacy laws, which I don't recommend. So if you're after average people and average results, then ChatGPT is absolutely for you. But we've kind of learned along the way around what it takes to have great quality data, great quality people looking at that data, and great products that bring that to life. So I think that's one thing that I'm excited about, because the people that I work with are understanding what it should be used for and what it shouldn't be used for. It's never been easier to create some proof of concept that does this thing that we think we would like. But it's also never been harder to make sure that the quality of data, of inputs and the outputs, is really strong. I know Sheilin mentioned Textio earlier. Kieran Snyder, the CEO there, did some really good stuff on what does this mean for one particular use case around job descriptions, right? Because if you ask ChatGPT, write me a job description for a receptionist, I'll give you 0 guesses around which gender it suggests that person is, right? Again, just this is not the application of the tools that we want. So very excited about what we can do to train large language models. Absolutely. We've got a number of experiments at play, and just between me and my 318 friends, here. A lot of that is around like how do we look at targeting the right job competencies. We've done a lot in terms of technology assessments like Sheilin mentioned, and making sure that the proctoring can stand up to that. We've done a lot with essay writing and sort of language evaluation. There's a lot we can do around interviews as well, which is in the works. So there's a lot of excitement there, but sort of targeting our focus is probably the thing that I'm most excited about.
Brilliant. And I'm conscious of time, right? So I'm going to move us to sort of key takeaways. We've covered a lot of ground together. There are a lot of questions that we've covered from the comments throughout the session. And we're not necessarily going to get through any more today, but we will do as part of the follow-up. But I just want to ask each of you for a key takeaway and also a specific view on how and if you see this shaping different skills as part of talent management, right? So Sheilin, I'm going to come to you first. What's your key takeaway? And more specifically, is there anything that you see that's particularly pertinent for the role of talent management and how that might evolve?
I would ask everyone to certainly think back to a moment in time when you integrated or added a new technology to the way that you do work. And remember how you advanced beyond that. Remember the boost that it gave you, and imagine attempting to do your job now without that thing, be it the internet, be it the mobile phone, be it cloud technology. And I think cloud technology is probably the best analogy in this particular case. So in many cases, it simplified the way that data storage and access and the use of applications is done. It dramatically simplified it. By simplifying it, that doesn't mean that it took jobs away. It actually added and created new jobs that didn't exist before. And then for those that weren't directly affected by that, it changed how you interact with certain technologies on a daily basis. Like Office 365 was not a thing that was cloud-based. I don't know ever how many years ago, because I was in a Google shop for a long time, but 15 years ago, let's say that, everything was on your desktop. But now I can collaborate with my colleagues so much more easily to do things like this presentation here. So I would encourage everyone to think back to that time when you introduced a new technology, adapted to it, and ultimately became a potentially better, more productive professional because of it. And that key is adaptation. And I think thinking about cloud is probably a meaningful way to apply that and make that tangible and real and apply to chatbot technology.
Fantastic. Sarah, I'm going to come to you. Same question.
So I think my key takeaway would be the sky is not falling, at least not yet. We're hearing a lot of questions about how the use of assessment is going to be impacted. And based on the investigations that we've done, and we've done some really deep digging into this, but we don't see that these tools yet are diminishing the value or accuracy of a diverse set of talent assessments. So obviously, as Sam has mentioned, this is moving at light speed. So we're going to need to keep up and monitor the space. But what we're going to see are these new assessment designs that I mentioned earlier, where we're going to be working with the chatbots, not against them, and creating those new mitigation and detection techniques as well to make sure that we stay ahead of this.
Fantastic. Sam?
I think in the talent acquisition space, I think the key takeaway, and I think we'd mentioned it earlier, right? But the information coming in from candidates' applications and resumes is not as specifically written by those candidates, right? It's been the lowest it's ever been. That means two things. One thing is you need to find ways around that or alongside that to get quality evaluation of candidates. Second, you have to look end to end, because there's no one process to fix. There's no one part of the process to fix. You need to look at your processes end to end from a selection method. So I think those are the two things for TA. But TM, the other thing I'd say is just like, what does this mean for learning and technical learning? And I use a personal example here. I've been threatening to teach myself SQL code for 100 years. And I'm like, should I go and do one of those courses and a little badge up on my LinkedIn profile and all that kind of stuff? But I realized that learning that technical skill now, the floor for that being useful is like super low because of GPT, right? And so for talent management professionals, what does it mean to learn technical skills now, right? I went through and I was able to put together some really helpful SQL code in like 20 minutes based on my specific example. And I was like, I would have wasted my time on a traditional course, introduction to SQL, right? And so I think we've got to adapt to how people learn and like learn alongside these technologies. I think Sheilin's point earlier, soft skills are becoming more important. I know there was a comment on the LinkedIn chat there a little bit to say maybe soft skills are going away, but I actually think the opposite. Like if you have soft skills and you can use technology, then the world is your oyster. So I think for talent management, for those of us working in that, I think it's a great opportunity to think like, what does it mean anymore to upskill in a particular technical skill, especially? So I think that's super exciting.
So while you've got the camera, Sam, you started and opened the session with some hot takes. So I'd love you to close it with just some closing thoughts and wise words from SHL.
Hot takes and wise words. Okay, Julia, thank you. I think, I think the main thing is to, what we were saying earlier, just because the technology exists doesn't mean we should use it for everything. Let's still solve problems that candidates have, that recruiters have, that our employees have, that people who might want to apply for our jobs have, people that are going through a candidate experience might have, right? It's just making sure like that Oprah meme of like, everyone gets a chatbot. This is like, just because it exists doesn't mean everyone needs to get a chatbot, right? And so let's just, let's really understand the pace of this, and it's fast. Let's experiment. Let's be really clear about the problems that we're solving along the way. Let's use this technology properly. Again, I hate to bag on the marketers for the third time in sort of 1 hour, right? But there is a different bar for us than other professions, right? And so we should take that seriously, and we should absolutely move with the speed of GPT. And it's given us great impetus to build new technologies and new products. But we need to go at the speed at which we can solve our candidates' problems, our employees' problems. And I think we're all really excited about that. And if you're excited about something on the LinkedIn chat, then let us know, because this is the thing about ChatGPT. It came out and we're all learning it at the same time, right? So we're super excited to be on this journey, and I'm sure you are, because you're on this LinkedIn Live, right? But it's exciting.
That's brilliant. So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sheilin. It's been great to hear your perspectives, and thank you to everyone on the line who's taken the time to share their questions and perspectives with us on this session. So we would love to hear from you and what you thought of the session. So we've got a QR code on screen, so scan it with your phones and tell us about your experience. So what worked, what didn't, how we can improve for future sessions, but also if there's specific information or topics that you would like to hear from us moving forward, now's your chance to share that. So we'll keep that up on the screen for a little bit longer. But for those that haven't been able to join or want to listen to a replay, we'll get the recording up on this post before the end of the week, so you can watch back at your leisure. And we'll also make sure that someone from SHL gets in contact with you to find out if you need any more information or if you have any questions. But in the meantime, you can reach out to Sam, Sheilin, and Sarah through LinkedIn if you've got any specific questions. But yes, thank you once again for taking the time with us today. I've really enjoyed the session, and I hope you have too. So that's over and out for us now, but this won't be the last time you'll hear from us.